Hi, everyone. I feel like it's been a million years since we've seen you. My name is Lynn, Student Services Assistant at East Los Angeles College. This is my partner, Anne, my wife.
Hello.
And I'm here today to share some resources, and we're going to do a little reading. I'm still reading The Pool of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. So that's what I'm going to be reading from. And Anne has a book called Mask of Shadows. It's like sci-fi anime sort of.
Yeah, it was like, and our understanding is that there's like some gayish characters in it. That's mainly one of the reasons why. And I'm gonna, while she's reading, I'll do some coloring in this. You can find a coloring book about just about anything. And this one is about Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez. No, it's Alexandria. Man. And the only thing I don't like about it is that in every picture of the book, they've got her hair black. Let me give her some red hair or something, you know. And they have a little story, a little vignette here next to each one. And the first one, can I read it?
Sure.
This is AOC. This is a story about Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, a woman who wore holes into her shoes, walking the streets of her district to earn a seat in the U.S. Congress. A Puerto Rican woman from the Bronx who lost her father to cancer. A science nerd who won an award from Intel. A fighter for hashtag Medicare for All, a living wage, and a hashtag Green New Deal. A new inspiration for the working class. This is AOC. I guess she's sitting on her stoop when she was a kid up there in the Bronx.
Pretty cool. You can find coloring books for anything.
Seriously, if you go to Amazon and just whatever pops into your head, write it in there, and you'll see they've got a freaking coloring book for it.
Even one for curse words. I mean, that's my favorite one.
No, it's not. Don't say that.
It's one of my favorite ones, totally. My cousin gave it to me.
No, we have a Great Day of the Dead one too.
Oh yeah, that one might be my favorite.
And we actually have a small library just of those.
It's stress reliever.
Yeah.
Anyway, also I wanted to share with you that even though our campus is in a virtual world, our student health center is still open. That's the best resource that I have to share with you. The provider that is part of the student health center, they use a service provider called Via Care. They're located down the street. I think it's 717 Atlantic. They're down the street from the school. They are still open and accepting patients. So you can go there with your student ID. If you don't have a student ID, if you know your student ID number, they'll use that. If you don't know that, then you can contact me and I can give it to you to be able to use, and they'll just verify that you're a student. You don't have to have your fees currently paid or anything like that.
That's good.
Yeah, they stopped having that as a requirement once we went into this virtual world.
Crazy how things work, huh?
Yeah, all of a sudden.
Boom.
Boom, yeah. So I haven't heard anything about ELAC being a vaccination or testing site, but I did hear that Pierce College is going to be a vaccination site. So I think that's really awesome. If I hear anything about ELAC, I will certainly share it with you. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, of course, you know, I didn't release a video last week because of all the shit that was happening in the Capitol. And I don't want that to be seen as complacency. I am definitely against white supremacy. I just didn't want to be on video crying the whole time in front of you. So
it was awful. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely awful.
For everybody, obviously.
And I just read that the FBI had a report that there was going to be a war in the Capitol the day before it happened. So it's just terrible to me that we have this freaking racist white supremacist in our White House, and these are the things that he's able to get away with, and we just can't let it happen. I don't know if you've seen the video from Arnold Schwarzenegger, but that is a really powerful video talking about, you know, the equivalency of what's happened in history. Was it the Night of Glass? from the Nazi Germany
Oh,
era.
yeah.
Jesus Christ,
Not-
my cat just climbed the screen. Oh, it's
Just
like as soon as the
ignore her.
computer comes on, the cats go wild. It's like they know something's going on. Woo!
And the
We wanna be
dog-
on TV too.
And the dog tries to regulate him.
So if you hear the dogs and the cats, that's what's going on. We do
Just
have a
ignore
small
them.
apartment, and yeah, they run around and do whatever they want.
And we're drinking smoothies.
Yeah, so we're high on sugar.
It looks kind of toxic, but it's great.
Before I forget, I wanted to share my email address. It's
Much-
Wood,
Stop.
WOOD. C is in cat, L is in Larry. So that's Wood, CL at elac.edu. And my name is Lynn. Last name is Wood. Sorry, I'm laughing at the cat. And if you're a student struggling in the system, or you want to find or apply to the school, but you're not sure what to do, feel free to send me an email and I can help get you started. But the book that I have to read to you from today is called The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. She is a lesbian, so that's a goal. Either books about LGBTQ folks or by LGBTQ folks.
But only positive ones, not like ones talking about, exodus or any of that crap.
Oh yeah, of course. We're all about positivity here at
Making sure
Casa Lynn and Anne. The great thing about The Pull of the Stars is it is about Ireland in 1918, and she works in a maternity ward. But the great, I don't want to say great, but interesting thing is that sort of parallels that you see. She, in the opening of the book, she talks about seeing them sanitizing the streets. She's talking about seeing people wearing masks. This is the flu pandemic in 1918, and they didn't have a name for it at the time, so they call it different things. And it's just interesting the parallels that you see happening in the book. And this is 1918 during the flu, and here we are in 2021. And I haven't seen anybody sanitizing the streets yet here, but I have seen it overseas where they were doing it in China and Spain.
What could they possibly be spraying? Like bug spray.
Basically, yeah.
Like
but
what's his name in Superstore?
yeah. Okay, but just to read you
Sorry,
from
it's
the
the shirt.
front, it says Dublin, 1918, 3 days in a maternity ward at the height of the Great Flu, a small world of work, risk, love, death, and unexpected love by the best-selling author of The Wonder and the Room. Ireland is doubly ravaged by war and disease, and she's a nurse. Julia Power works in an understaffed hospital in the city center where expectant mothers who have come down with this terrible new flu are quarantined together. So it's also interesting in that it is a maternity ward. So you see how the women are treated or mistreated or treated well. They're really poor women. So
Was it Dublin Hospital? Well, there was only one Dublin hospital in Dublin at the time.
so I guess, yeah.
My mother was born there in 1925.
So I'm on page 142, and she glanced up just as if to check I wasn't offended. I said, "Ready, doctor?" Now, I don't think we'll chance a cranial cut, as they're hard to cover up. I was relieved. I'd helped peel back a face before, and it was one of those sights I wished I could unsee. Ooh, I already want to unsee it just talking about it.
I want to unhear it.
Dr. Lynn's finger rested on Ida Noonan's hairline. This weird flu. I've seen it start with thirst, restlessness, sleeplessness, clumsiness, a touch of mania, then afterwards a blurring or dulling of one or more senses. But alas, none of this shows under the microscope. I volunteered for a few weeks after my own dose. All colors look like a gray to me. Then you got off lightly, amnesia, lethargy. I've seen survivors with shakes, others frozen to living statues, also suicides, far more than the papers admit.
Sure.
I asked, they do it in the delirious phase or long after. Hadn't you seen a patient jump to his death only last week? Oh, I felt gullible. We were told he'd slipped from the open window, but in fact he had jumped. Dr. Lynn set her scalpel by Ina Nuna's left shoulder. I'll start the trunk incision here and the family will never spot it. God bless the work. I watched the skin part in a deep, clean arc under the limp breasts, barely a trickle of blood. Never easy when it's one's own patient. I wondered if by one she meant herself or me. If you don't mind my asking, doctor, with your interest in research, why aren't you on staff at one of the big hospitals? Her thin lips twisted wryly. One of them would have me. She cut straight down from breastbone through navel to pubis, finishing the capital Y. I was offered a position some years ago, she added, but their medical men shied away from the prospect of a petticoated colleague. They didn't want a woman in their midst. I knew it wasn't my place to comment, but their loss. Dr. Lynn nodded to acknowledge that. She added crisply, and on the whole, my gain. Shifted my tent was left me encounter and study all the ills that flesh is heir to. She snipped on, adding, besides, I've been cashiered by now anyway by my commitment to the cause. My face was suddenly hot. I'd assumed the doctor would keep a veil drawn over her other ungrounded life. Since she'd brought it up, I made myself ask, so it's true then, you were with the rebels on the roof at City Hall? She corrected, the Irish Citizen Army. I took over as commanding officer when Sean Connolly was shot putting up the green flag. A silence. I said unevenly, I got some experience with gunshot wounds during that week. I'm sure you did, said Dr. Lynn. A woman who was with child, a civilian, was brought in on a stretcher and bled out before I could stop it. Her tone was sad. I heard about her. I'm so sorry. One of almost 500 killed that week and thousands injured, mostly by British artillery. Woo, I couldn't say it. I saw red because of that was Tim's army, I said. My brother served, the king, I mean. I added that awkwardly in case I hadn't been clear. Dr. Lynn nodded. So many Irishmen have sacrificed themselves in the cause of empire and capital. But as with you, terrorists who began the shooting in Dublin and treacherously in the middle of World War, my hands froze. A berating, a physician? What had I done? I thought Dr. Lynn might order me out of the mortuary. Instead, she set down her blade and said civilly, I saw the national question much the same way as you until 5 years ago, Nurse Power. I was taken aback. I took up the cause of women in earnest first, she added, then the labor movement. I pinned my hopes on a peaceful transition to a self-governing Ireland that would treat its workers and mothers and children more kindly. But in the end, I realized that despite 4 decades of paying lip service to the principle of home rule, the British meant to keep phobbing us off. Only then, after much soul searching, I assure you, did I become what you would call a terrorist. I said nothing. Dr. Lynn picked up the big shears and worked it along each side of Ina Noonan. Then she lifted the breastbone and frontal ribs in one go, the raising of a portcullis. Portcullis? I'm not sure what that is.
Where is it?
Portcullis. That made me tremble. How frail my own rib cage. How breakable we all were. I needed to get us off politics, so I asked, did your own dose of flu leave you with any odd symptoms, doctor? She didn't look up as she said, I haven't had it. Christ almighty, the woman was up to her elbows in microbes. My voice came out shrill. Would you not put on a mask even? Interestingly, there's very little evidence that they have any protective effort. I scrub my hands and gargle with brandy and leave the rest to Providence. Retractor, please.
Oh, do you remember the other day we were watching something and they said that they dropped a porculus? It's like that heavy grating that comes down. Remember we were watching something that was like they were down in the
Okay, what is the definition?
a strong heavy grating that can be lowered down roofs on each side of a gateway to block it. Like
Oh, so she's comparing that to the ribs in the raising of a porticulus.
put
The
porculus.
breastbone and frontal ribs in one go. She compared it to the raising of a
Porculus.
oh my God, I can't say that
Just
word.
say porculus.
Porculus.
There you go. You said it.
But right now she's aghast because the doctor is up to her elbows in microbes and hasn't had the flu, and this person died from the flu, and she's not even wearing a mask. Yeah. So she says, I scrub my hands and gargle with brandy, and I leave the rest to Providence.
Gargle with brandy, did you say?
She did, indeed. Dr. Lin went on, as for the authorities, I believe the pandemic will run its course before they've agreed on any but the most feeble action, recommending onion and eucalyptus oil. Imagine, like sending beetles to stop a steamroller. No, a wise old Greek once said, we all live in an unwalled city. She must have sensed she lost me because she spelled it out when it comes to death. Oh yes, quite. She lifted Ida Noonan's lungs, 2 black bags, and dropped them wetly onto a waiting dish. Dear me, what a mess. Take a specimen, please, though I expect the engorgement will obscure the image. I shaved a thin layer. I labeled the slide. You know, there's a brand new expensive oxygen machine upstairs. I shook my head. Dr. Lin said, I tried it out on 2 men with pneumonia this afternoon. Quite useless. I trickled the pure gas right up their nose, and it can't get through their gummed up passages.
Oh, a respirator. Like an OG respirator.
Right, yeah. She dictated now more formally, swelling of the pleurant material leaking from the alveoli, bronchioles, bronchi. I wrote it all down. If something attacks the lungs, she murmured, they fill up, so one drowns in one's own inner sea. I had a comrade go like that last year. From the flu? No, he'd been force-fed. Tom Ash had it went all down the wrong way. Oh my goodness, that's a horrible way to die, being force-fed and he's
Yeah, how many
suffocated on the
people you
food.
think died then when they force fed them like that, when they didn't have to?
I'd heard of suffragettes mounting hunger strikes, but
Yeah.
oh my gosh, he was a Sinn Féin prisoner.
Sinn Féin.
Yeah, he was the Irish resistant prisoner. God, that made me want to cry. My voice wobbled as I asked, this man actually died of it? Dr. Lin nodded as I stood there taking his pulse. I felt terribly sorry for him and for her. That did not change my disapproval of their cause. Right? Still treating the patient, but one dark braid was coming loose at the back of Dr. Lin's head. It bobbed as she worked her instruments. I wondered how long she'd spent in prison and how she'd stayed so sturdy and so lively. She dictated, vocal cords eroded, thyroid 3 times normal size, heart dilated. Isn't it always bigger in expected women, though? She held up the heart for me to study, but Mrs. Noonan's is flabby on both sides, do you see? Whereas the normal enlargement in pregnancy is only on the left to supply the fetus with more blood. I suppose the fetus demands more of everything, a mother's lungs, circulation, every part had to boost capacity, like a factory gearing up for war. I asked, could that be why this flu is hitting them so much harder? Because their systems are overworked already?
Well, yeah.
The doctor nodded. Sky-high morbidity, even for weeks after birth, which suggests their defenses have been weakened somehow. I thought of the old tale of Troy, Greek soldiers dropping out of the wooden horse's belly under cover of night and throwing open the gates. betrayed by one's own side. What was it Dr. Lin had quoted about an unwalled city? She cut, she scooped, I labeled, I bagged. She grumbled. So many autopsies being industriously performed all over. Just about all we've learned about the strain of flu is that it takes around 2 days to incubate. Aren't they any closer to a vaccine? Aren't they any closer? She shook her head, held her loose braid. No one's even managed to isolate the bacterium on a slide yet. Perhaps the little bugger's too small for us to see, and we'll have to wait for the instrument makers to come up with a stronger microscope, or possibly it's some new form of microbe altogether. I was bewildered and daunted. All rather humbling, she added ruefully. That's crazy. I think I'm going to stop there because
That was intense, though.
it really was. She's doing, poor Ida Noonan has passed away. She struggled and struggled in the other chapters of the book with the flu. And now here we are at her post-mortem. And we see her lungs are black. And
But it sounds so current. It sounds like you're reading a book about now.
yeah, that's one of the reasons I love this book. I really like the style of writing of Emma Donoghue. It's very easy to read, but it's not an easy read, if you know what I mean. And it's not like she's using simple language. I guess that's what I mean. But it's easy to understand. But I personally can totally transport myself to 1918 in this maternity ward.
You can relate.
Like a
It's very
fly
relatable.
on the wall and see what's going on.
It's very relatable.
Yes.
I'm glad I found it.
I'm glad you found it too. It is on a bestseller list, by the way. I did see it on multiple bestseller lists.
I think I found Emma Donoghue on, it was a list of LGBTQ writers that I saw on Google. Okay. I'm going to read some of this book here, something altogether different. Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller. And we believe it has some maybe trans or gay characters in it. Okay. Chapter 1. Let's see. I'm not even sure what it's about, so I'm just going to start reading it.
I believe it is a series of books.
Yeah. It's like there's one that comes after this, but we didn't get it.
But this one in particular was recommended to me because of the characters in the book.
Yeah, and for me, I'm interested in fantasy.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of before, fantasy, not anime. Thank you.
Right. The thick, briny scent of sweat-soaked leather seeped through my cloth mask. A guarded carriage rattled down the road upwind of me. I leaned out of my tree and caught a flicker of light from a carriage lamp. The carriage's blue paint shone gilded and mud splattered. I groaned, nobles. The branches beneath me creaked as footsteps scraped along the bark. I flipped the knife into my palm. The sentence for robbing nobles was hanging, but only if they caught you. Lord, Sal, where you at? Wrath burst through the leaves and tripped over my perch. Point of hiding is to stay hid. I shoved him backward and yanked his mask down over his face. What do you want? Wrath tapped my nose with his baton. You up to robbing Erlins? Erlins were stiff and cold as the lands they ruled, and merciless as death. They'll hold a picnic at the gallows. Not a word I normally use, picnic, but it's in the book. I tightened the knots at the back of my mask. You up to keeping quiet? Wrath slapped a hand over his mouth and nodded toward the carriage below us. I crept along my branch far as I dared, eyeing the coach's window. If I had no shoulders, I'd fit through easy. This'll be fun, I shook my head. This would hurt. Fun? Wrath rapped at the stump where his little finger had been. Or you miss and we all get hanged. Fun? Fun. Wrath huffed, scrambled out of my tree. His footsteps whispered over the deadfall, and a long, low bird whistle echoed between the trees. One call, one carriage, and one shot at meeting our quota. Horses clomped over the dirt, carrying the soldiers closer to our nets hidden in the trees. 10 mounted and armored guards circled the coach. They looked right and left, but they never glanced up. I exhaled and tightened my grip on the branch. The carriage rolled beneath me. We dropped the nets. The soldiers howled and pierced and spears. Sorry. We dropped the nets. The soldiers howled. Spears and arms tangled in the lines, and the driver jerked the coach to a stop. Wrath whistled. I flung myself from the tree. The boots tore through the carriage's curtain and took out a passenger with a sharp heel to the head. My shoulders scraped both sides of the window frame as I slid into the carriage. I waved my knife. Your money or your lives? I asked, twisting round to the noble. Money, the noble was barely holding. Money. The noble was barely older than me and half a head shorter, but she squared her slim shoulders and glared at me over wire-rimmed spectacles. She nodded to the unconscious servant I kicked aside. For her, too. I swallowed my usual command of hush and drop your knives and nodded. Deal. Jewelry, money, and all manner of fancy things in your lap. Fine. Finally, someone smart enough to know they weren't winning this fight. She yanked the rings from her fingers. I rid the servant of her purse with one hand and held my knife to the noble with the other. Clever as she seemed, I didn't trust a noble not to plant a hatpin in my back. She cleared her throat. Problem, Erland? I glanced at her. No, she stared at my knife. And you may call me milady or nothing at all. I grinned and bowed. How Erland of her. Better than screaming and fighting, though. Of course, milady. She shifted. Her jewelry was a puddle of silver in her lap, with her purse half closed over crumpled paper. She'd laced her fingers together to hide her trembling. You missed one. I lifted a small locket from her neck, doing my best not to scare her. Wasn't like I enjoyed scaring people, especially not the ones being smart when I robbed them. Being efficient got the same results as being mean. I'm not going to stab you unless you stab me first. You're robbing me at knife point, she jerked away. A sneer twisted her pleasant face into the Ireland expression I knew so well. It's not valuable. It's got real rubies. I turned it over. Twisted copper rose petals with un, with inlaid ruby silver, with inlaid ruby slivers adorned the front of the locket. I snapped open the clasp. Two portraits were glued inside, one of a child with chubby cheeks, and the other of a woman veiled in blue who shared at this lady's long nose. I slid my knife into the sheath on my belt and dropped the necklace. Take it off. Her hands flew to her throat. It's not valuable. Shush. I'm not going to take it, but you need to hide it. Wouldn't do for Wrath to bust in and find the lady with jewels still around her neck. He'd laugh at me for days and take the necklace. She fumbled with the clasp and hissed when her hair tangled in the chain. Who wouldn't? Quiet, hold still. A dark curl was knotted around the thin chain. I tugged it free, inhaling a deep breath of her rosewater perfume and stumbling over my words. My boss finds out I let you keep this, he'll take my hand. I'll try to keep your mercy out of the warrant description, she smiled. Barely. She smiled barely, but thank you. First time anyone thanked me for robbing them. She was frightfully pretty, too, with her dark curls and confident chin, standing up to me without fighting. Talking someone down took nerve and smarts. She pulled away with her warm scent, and her warm scent went with her. Hide it. Sorry I mucked up your hair. I gestured to the curls behind her ears. Lusting after Erlin's would get me nowhere but dead. Well, I'm being robbed. She slipped the locket up her sleeve into a hidden pocket and patted down her hair. You're young for a road agent and nicer than the stories I've heard. And you're young for a member of the Queen's Court. Bet that pissed off all your old Erlin friends. I held up her silver ring stamped with our Queen's entwined lightning bolts. She couldn't have been more than a year older than me. You piss them off too much, and they might send you out here with too few guards and refuse to pay your ransom. I'd not put it past those warlords to turn on their own for profit. A scream ripped through the window as the scuffle outside pitched into shouts and clashing swords, and the lady lurched away from me. Sorry, not kidnapping you, only joking. I pocketed her ring and bowed. Apologies for scaring you, my lady. She wrinkled her nose. Not for the robbery? Only for scaring you. I whistled once. I was done. Time to go. And nudged the servant with my toe. And for kicking her, tell her I'm sorry for that. And the robbery? She didn't even flinch, just lifted her chin. Lords, girls, and the robbery. You harass everyone? I twisted around, memorizing the line of her jaw, the fall of her hair over her light brown cheeks, and the smear of freckles along her nose. Least I'd have one bright light among my list of bad, bloody memories. Only the ones robbing me, she smiled, lips closed and light eyes narrowed. You're not one of those who've been kidnapping, are you? No, they're vicious as cottonmouths and running the southern roads. Stay clear of there. I gestured at her, waiting for Rath's answering whistle. But tell them I was mean for my warrant. Those fools kidnapping nobles would steer clear of our roads if they thought we were meaner than them. Terrifying, she said with a mock gasp. Oh, a giant, monstrous beast with knives and a mask as hideous as their manners. It'll save my guards their egos. I opened my mouth to make her take back the manners jab when the carriage door flew open. Rath ripped the top hinge clear off. More guards, he hollered, shaking his head and flinging blood across the carriage. Fast as he'd appeared, he vanished into the trees. Outside the carriage, soldiers and thieves flailed in the darkness, a tangle of limbs and blades. I glanced at the lady. You want that warrant? Then you'll have to escape. She shoved me out the door. Go! I leapt out of the coach and into the night, her image scorched into my mind. Bam. Do you want me to?
Bam. Well, it's interesting so far. We're Robin and there's ladies and
it reminds me of Robin Hood.
yes, or Sir Lancelot.
Yes. No, Robin. No, Sir Lancelot was kind of a pussy. I mean, Sir Lancelot. Yeah. Robin
Anyway.
Hood. Well, actually, there are Robin Hood stories and books, which I found out when I was a little kid. I thought it was just a stupid movie with Errol Flynn, but then I went to the library, which I always did, and I found the Robin Hood books, and they were totally different from the movie.
Interesting. Maybe a good time to mention LA County Library. You can do pretty much everything online. They do have virtual. I was able to get a library card from them. I think it was within 2 hours they issued me a card. So then they have an app. It's called Libby, and you can check books out electronically. I know it's kind of hard for me personally. I like to obviously we have the physical copies of the books that we're interested in. But you could also then purchase the books later if you wanted to. But that's a good way to have access to books that you don't necessarily have to purchase. LA County Library, ton of books. My local library, for me, I wasn't able to access their system electronically. I wasn't able to get a library card electronically. I don't already have one, but LA County Library, I was able to do everything online and
Oh.
then access books.
Also, when you open your office again, you'll have these books.
Right.
Like we'll probably, even though I did purchase these, probably donate these, maybe not, I don't know about this one. We'll donate some of the ones that we've been like, even though she believes that she has a list of books that she's going to be able to loan out.
Yeah, that's the goal of this whole thing is for us, once we return to campus, is to be able to have a small lending LGBTQ plus library. And the books that I've been reading from since March will be part of that collection. I just happen to own some of them. And then I've gone ahead and purchased others because obviously the pandemic's still going on and I'm still at my home. So yeah, I need to have stuff to read.
Like
But
gayish ones.
my point was, if you're not able to purchase stuff, you can access books through the LA County Library, and they have a ton, including LGBTQ books. I found a few of the books that we've read on that Libby app. But anyway, so my email address is woodcl@elac.edu. Feel free. My name is Lynn, last name is Wood. Feel free to send me an email. I'm a student services assistant at East Los Angeles College, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you are a student or you know of a student who wants to apply or is stuck in the system, feel free to give me an email. I can, check it out and maybe go in the back of the system and see like, hey, Denise, or hey, Anna, here's Julio and he's trying to get in. Can you help him? That kind of thing. It's no problem. It's not a big deal. And I know school might seem a little overwhelming, but it is something positive that you can do for yourself. So you always want to stay in the positive. I hope you're surrounded by peace and love wherever you are. And if you see a racist, tell them to go to hell.
Fuck Trump.
Yes, Trump needs to go to hell too. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Take care. Bye. Thanks for reading today, baby.
Thanks, hello, unit.